a great conversation piece. Just put Jungian in front of something. How are you doing? Yeah, I'm in a very Jungian phase right now, and you sound like you. Oh, this guy
knows what he's talking about. Yeah. Hey, so I have the wonderful Ivar from Enslaved with me. How are you?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, man. Very good. So let's get straight into. Is it Utgard?
Yeah.
Is that how you say it? Yeah.
Yeah, very good. That's a pretty Norwegian pronunciation. If people want to go Utgard, or you pronounce it however you want, your own accent, or like an American ordering French wine, totally fine. I love it all.
So, with that in mind, obviously I feel like the concept of Utgard is very complex. Let's just say. So, how would you best describe the theoretical ideas that lie behind it?
Yeah, I think it's one of the favorite concepts that we've had so far, and I have to say, the more I talk about it, the more it comes across as a pretty good concept in general terms, because it's complex and simple at the same time, and that's what you want, I guess. It is a place in Norse mythology.
Yeah.
It's the origin. That's where it came into being first, and this is where the giants come from, like the primeval giants of the mythology, that sort of sprung out of the primeval soup, if you want. Mm-hmm. That would be the evolutionary term, I guess. And from there's sort of this development, evolution, so on, and it ends up in Asgard, where the gods are. They're fairly young in terms of mythological time. Yeah, don't think Marvel. It's a very different thing in mythology. If you want, the mythology went off the charts, so to speak, in our contemporary society. And then this Austrian psychologist Carl Jung, to use Jung about stuff, it is great, I have to admit. It's a great conversation piece. Just put Jungian in front of something. How are you doing? Yeah, I'm in a very Jungian phase right now, and you sound like you. Oh, this guy
knows what he's talking about. Yeah.
I love it. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I know how to use Jung in a sentence. He was looking at what we do have in common as people, and especially within a group of people. So he discovered these roles, or the archetypes that he likes to say. Archetype is also a very popular thing. I think if you go to a Prague dinner party, and you have Jungian and archetypes, then you're all set. And that's a concept that's it resembles. That's what he saw. It's like this is pretty fairly similar to mythology. Like this god, and then throw in a crazy giant and a thing like that. And that maybe mythology is basically a way to describe a people's psychological history or development. That's why all these mythologies were fairly similar. They just call different things, And up in Norway, the mighty gods, they call upon the rain and the thunder and lightning. Not so much maybe in Asia, where it's more like the sun and things like that. That's dominating the mythology. And Utgard is important in the sense that it represents all the shadow side. And shadow is, in our modern Christian world, is very negative, or most of the time it's like an evil place. But what it means psychologically is just the opposite. That's what Jung was talking about. That we have this thing where, if you focus a lot on trying to be non-selfish, we're made out in the sense we're balanced. So then you would feed a shadow aspect of yourself that needs selfishness, in a sense, that pushes for it. So then you have to go to balance it out. Yeah, that's why we can sometimes then. I'm not saying that I do this, but then you turn off the phone and then you admire yourself in giant mirrors and record fake radio programs where it's all about giving tribute to you. And
you never do that.
No, I would never do that. And the album is about a journey into that land and a journey through it with the shadows, so to speak. Right. And it raises a question, I think, that the world that we're living in today, that are we really is it a result of sort of like shadow world not being paid attention, or is it the actual shadow world that's taken over? It's just like, it's so weird and strange. Turn on the television and I see world leaders basically going like, well, you're ugly, I'm going to punch your face. Like, I'm like, are we still in the right side of this thing? I'm not sure we're in charge of the situation entirely.
What made you want to kind of have this as such a charged, theme for the album? Because you've got like geographical demarcation in there, cultural ideas. It's a lot to take in. So why did you kind of do that?
If you look at the world today, I'm in the airport, and during the first 5 minutes, I'll have like a bunch of people walk past me, trying to emulate the look of how people looked in Norway in the year 450. And that's not even the odd people, that's a normal people.
Yeah.
And I think back in 91 when Enslaved started, we were the one band doing that. We traveled to Mexico, did a tour in the US, and we had like Viking artifacts on stage, and it was just like something people hadn't seen. And people would be like, do you think this is too weird for people or whatever? And we even called our music Viking metal at some point. Then towards the end of the 90s, Viking metal became a thing. We saw what it was, and we were like, you can have it. We're going to be over here and
kind of swerve it.
Yeah, and read about Jung just over here. But it's become, going from the first albums where we were describing sort of mythology or battles or whatever, which is very, very interesting still, but then we try to connect it to a relevance for ourselves. We don't want to disconnect from the now and go somewhere else,
Yeah.
One thing that's pretty surprising, for one thing, is when people say like the pagan revival. It's surprising to a lot of people, including a lot of people in the pagan revival, that one of the things that we can take from the Vikings is a strong emphasis and preference for multicultural societies. People have been, and especially some guys in very neat Hugo Boss designed uniforms half a century ago, had the idea of the opposite, that it was sort of a culture of racial pureness and so on. Like in Norway, for instance, this is something I work with Einar from Vardrun on our last album, Bjørnson. We went and looked at the coastal history of Norway and so on, like how Norway came into being a place and a nation. And there's been it's hard to get the message across because it's so popularized that the Vikings were like this, some of the people that came from further south of Europe, like the toughest Germanic and Nordic people went up there and became the Vikings. The truth is pretty far from that. They did that too, but they also came from the west, from strange places there, and they came from the north, which is very important because they came a lot there from the indigenous Norwegian people, the Samis, Mongolian tribes. They came down, and it all sort of melted together, and that was like highly regarded. It was regarded as something that was very valuable in a sense, to add sort of an alien element, a cultural element was regarded as something of high value and integrated. And that's why this, and you hear a little about it, is you go to Kazakhstan or people or areas around there, and you find a lot of the same scales and so on. Same remains of a culture that sort of kept mixing and blending with each other. I think that's for us. That's an important part too. We don't want to overstate it and go like everybody hold each other's hands now while we play this next song. That's not what it is about. But it's about we would like to be a voice in all of this that actually says this has relevance for today, not only as a way of being interested in what used to be, like the old farts we are, but it's relevant for young people. It's relevant for a lot of things in society.
So moving slightly kind of away from the themes of the album, I've heard that a lot of the songs that you wrote were using an acoustic guitar, which to me is so strange, because when you hear the scope of how big this album is and how crazy you guys went, how did that evolve from just one singular riff that, you know, begins it?
Yeah, that's it's an interesting journey, and I would say the album is basically there's two riffs on the album. It's the opening for the third song sequence, and then the middle tough guy riff of Homebound.
Yeah.
The one that we all go like when we play it. That's 4 guitars, and the rest of the album is just 2 guitars, hard pan, left, right. Oh, wow. But it's me and Icedale. It's never happened before since, and it actually made me so paranoid that any new other project I play with, I make sure we're one rhythm guitarist. I'll just do the long, because I don't think I can achieve that with another guitarist. That we can get in sync on that level, that it makes it take on that size. It dates back to 2006 or something. We got the chance to meet Joe Barresi, the producer in LA. Mm-hmm. You know, the guy had mixed. Now he's produced the new Tool album, but already then he'd done a lot of work with Tool, which is a big thing for me. So I had to ask, like, what would be your advice for how we should do our albums? And he said, and I got ready, like I had my empty notepad like this. I'm gonna, at least the first 400 pages I'm gonna dedicate to blah blah. And then he just came with like one sentence. He said, "I've seen you guys live. Record 1 guitar hard left, 1 hard right, and that's it." I'm like, okay, that's it. That's your advice. But the idea to make the album on an acoustic guitar, we've worked a lot now that we've become so old in a sense that we're one of these people refer to as legacy bands. I'm like, I'm just about 40. I'm still looking at, you know, I have kids. I look at the other parents when they pick up in kindergarten, and I feel sometimes so out of place. It's like, am I one of these? Really? Can they see that I'm not like real? That I'm fake? I'm faking being an adult. I just want to have farting competitions with my youngest daughter and stuff like that. But then I have to pretend to be. Oh, daughter, I have to give you some advice today. I've learned to take some pride in it instead of just being like the normal, fake, humble Western. Like, oh my God, I don't want to talk about it. And at the same time, that's what you want to talk about, just that. So I admit it. Yeah, let's talk more about me. And then, and that opened a few toolboxes too. So I was thinking, like, useful and particularly dumb concept that we subscribed to then was that if you make a riff on an acoustic guitar and it sounds mighty and powerful, it's gonna be like 100-fold multiplied in mightiness and power when you put it on an electric guitar. So I was thinking about that kind of motivation is genius. It doesn't have to be right even. It doesn't have to make sense. But just have these sort of things that you reach for and believe in. That's the genius of the young band and the young composer. Because when you start going into this so-called adulthood to become mature, another word for idiot, is that like fantasy and that kind of like childish play becomes sort of a taboo, like something that you have to get rid of. Because it reveals something about you not doing things properly or something. And no wonder people start running out of ideas for writing albums when they get into that phase, because you need to have that sort of. It is hard to get used to the idea that it is in the same sphere as playing around with He-Man and Skeletor and having fun with that, but you can't have one without the other.
Of course. I think even, down to the guitar playing, it's slightly different. Like, in terms of, like Icedale's solos, for example. Yeah. I know previously there's been that kind of like, solo, but I feel like a lot of it was kind of a bit more minimalist this time.
Yeah, quite introspective, I think.
Yeah.
What I realized as a composer, very shamefully had to admit that, like, on E, is like, I was thinking, there should have been more leads there. Who's this moron who didn't like make room for more leads when you have like this? I would say one of the really best lead guitarists, both in technique but also in this way, like emotive and composing a solo. It's Icedale, and I guess that's me. I didn't. That's something that I didn't take enough into consideration. Not because I have to be nice. Icedale never complained about it. He sometimes I know if he feels the need to have a leader, he'll ask. It's as easy as that, and he didn't. And he's as much a rhythm guitarist as a lead guitarist. Yes, yeah. Then I realized for myself as a music fan and an Icedale fan, I have to do make some adjustments. And I really fought hard as having that as a priority. It stressed him out a little bit in this, and because he has the standards he has for himself and his own playing is just beyond anything. And I think if we both were like that, it wouldn't work. I would say, and just hearing the stuff that he can make, he'll send over things that are like, what do you think, guys? Is this somewhere in there what it could become? We're like, you have to get out of here. This is way beyond anything. This is perfect.
Finally, obviously Utgard is, we've discussed, it's very open to interpretation. There's many different ideas behind it. But what would be your personal Utgard?
Yeah, I think there's been a journey for me too, and I think what we're seeing is I'm very happy about it. It's a result of balancing several things. Having been in this band for a long time, there's been many changes. I think with this album I experienced the Utgard of being a little bit more open in the sense to hear, to really believe in. It's one thing is to say that I'm open. I want to hear all of people's opinions, but you have to walk the walk also, and that it was a bit of a strain. I have to say, I'm used to a lot more of just going through with things and so on, but I did make it a point for this album, and it wasn't conscious. It wasn't until, I guess, towards the end of the process that I noticed a lot of this ties in with the concept too, and also it just got the sense of urgency looking around myself, in the situation of being in such a privileged position of composing music for this particular group of people. Yeah. Just talked about Icedale, but how about like Grutle with his being like the best singer, an awesome bass player, Håkon, his keyboard skills is totally amazing. His knowledge of the instrument is fantastic, and then a new drummer, Ivar, and his musicality, drumming, and the vocals, like really taking their views into consideration and asking, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And having time when people are like, express when I sense that. And also with, I work very closely with our manager, but always had the view coming from the old school of like music that keeps in the band. Management guy, you go and get us an endorsement for chocolate, and then we'll take it from there. But this time, like, this is probably the person who's listening the most to Enslaved, more than us. Because we're fed up after a tour, but this guy's fucking listening to it. him and the people on his team are listening to it non-stop all year round and still loving it.
Yeah.
So there's got to be... So what do you think about this? Like, the last album, and here's a demo. What do you think, guys? So, and then noticing my own reactions and like when there's feedback, like, oh, this stuff, honestly, I don't feel that this is your most interesting side of Enslaved, and just feeling myself being like offended or going sour from it, and just diving into that basically, like what is it about that makes, and I guess it all is, in my case, I guess maybe for some other people that's used to doing things on their own, is it's not that there's such a strong belief that I have the best ideas, but at the bottom of being the sole composer, there's also a fear that there might be better ideas. Some of the best ideas came from that, and just being like, you know what, I totally agree. I'm just going to go ditch this and start over again.